So, what happens when plan A no longer becomes an option? Who do you become? How do you pivot? What are your new goals? In these situations, most of us find ourselves in self pity. And when Antonio Vaglica's MLB dreams were stripped from him, he had a similar response, but it did not last long. Despite his quote unquote failure, you may say, Antonio is now the founder of Consistency Wins, a podcast host, and a business coach to help businesses owners with asset protection, tax strategy, balance sheet optimization, and exit planning. Antonio is here with me today to talk about his success story and so much more. My guy, I'm excited to have you here. Welcome to Find Success.
Appreciate you, man. I love that introduction. Kind of gives me chills thinking about the baseball thing, and I know we'll dive into it. So I'm excited. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, yeah. Super excited to have you. I always get charged up talking to guys like you that are not too much older than me, but doing great things, and it's just always inspiring. So let's go back to the foundation of your story. We talked about baseball a little bit. Um, can you tell us about who you were as a baseball player? What were the ups and downs of your career?
Sure. Yeah. So let's bring it back to like 2012. Like I started playing baseball when I was like 4 or 5 years old. That's back in the early 2000s. But 2012 is really like one of the big decisions that I made where I forced my parents to make me go to a boarding school in North Carolina. I'm from New York. I begged them to go to this boarding school in North Carolina because it's very profound for sports. I graduated with 40 kids. It was an all-boys boarding school, very small. It was rather your parents were super rich or you were really good at sports. I was the latter. And crazy enough, that's kind of where I met my business partner today, funny enough. He convinced me to play on the football team, and we stay connected. And I'll explain that later. We're in business today together. But baseball was plan A, B, C, D, all the way through Z, right? There was nothing else. I was good at school, but not because like I cared much. It was just because if I studied and put my mind to something, I knew that I could, make it happen and get good results from it. But I didn't really care about school because I knew that I was going to play Major League Baseball. And so I played Division I sports. Then I was under the impression I was going to get drafted. I had multiple teams looking at me, and come draft day, 4 days of the draft, I look and my name was not on the board. And for me, that was devastating, absolutely devastating. It was the only goal that I had in my life, and nobody called. There was no, offer to play, to get signed on that side. I did have some offers to play in like professional and independent leagues or overseas, but I saw those as dead ends. And crazy enough, like I'm thinking about it now, I would just went like deep into it over the last couple of weeks because I've been trying to find my purpose. I've been doing things lately just because I know that like scientifically and logically, it'll get me to where I want to go. But I haven't been able to bring intentionality around what I'm doing and like purpose behind it, besides the fact that I just know it's going to work. And so I've been really trying to dig deep into that purpose. And I think what I've come down to is like, I think about that moment a lot. And that moment really charges me up because I had a very deep inflection point in my life where I could rather have gone through the adversity and powered through it and said, hey, no, I'm not going to take no for an answer, and I'm going to make this happen. And if I did that, I think I'd still be playing baseball today. But I took the route of quitting and going into a deep, dark depression. And I think about it now, and I think it all stemmed from like my lack of belief in myself. Where when I would tell people, in high school and in college that I was going to go play Major League Baseball, they would laugh at me. And that's common, right? People are going to laugh at you when you tell them you have big dreams. But the downside is that sometimes you believe it. And I believed it, right? I believed what they were saying. And ultimately that resulted in my self-conscious knowing that it's not going to work out. And then ultimately my work ethic wasn't exactly where it needed to be. And at the time I was still one of the best players in the country, but I wasn't putting in the work continuously. I was still kind of screwing around in the background, with, smoking weed and drinking and not having the right relationships. And I promised myself I would never do that again. So I digress there. We can pause there if that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Were any of these lessons learned in the moment when your name wasn't called on draft day, or was this years after the fact? Like, I guess, what did you learn about yourself throughout this process? Was it like, hey, woe is me, I'm not going to play in the MLB, or were you starting to learn things about yourself back then?
Yeah, great question. And so I think in the beginning, it was just a massive shot to my ego, right? I didn't learn anything besides the fact that I was not shit. Right? You go from being the man to no longer being the man and nobody cares. And now you got to go figure it out. Right? So like I grew up super upper middle class. My only problem was that I had no problems. So I didn't really understand how to handle adversity because I always got everything I wanted. And if I didn't, I would manipulate my way to find out, to get what I wanted, right? And so what I learned was that I had to go back to the drawing board, and that like success is, dependent upon how much work you put in, not based on like your innate talent, right? Because hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And I know that's like a cliche thing. Someone's probably said it on your podcast before, but that was what the big realization was, because I was not as mentally tough as I thought I was. I was playing a really good facade of like talking the talk, but not fully walking the walk. And I knew I need to make a pivot. But before then, I just like right after it happened, 6 to 8 months of depression kicked in, drugs, alcohol, all these bad relationships that I was going back to, until I made a decision. And like the craziest thing that I did, and I encourage everyone on this podcast to do something similar if you're in a feeling of being stuck, and it's super uncomfortable. But one day I was driving, and I was so sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was like, something hit me, and I was so angry at myself. And so I took a video. The video was like 7 minutes long of me basically pretty much cursing myself out of like, dude, like, what are you doing? Like, you're lacking consistency. You're not doing what needs to be done. You have so much potential and so many people depend on you, but you're not doing the work and you're not staying consistent. And I think about that. It gives me like chicken skin right now just thinking about it, because everything that I manifested in that video has come true just because I created the awareness around it. So I consider that my knock on the universe to God, my knock on the door to God or the universe, whatever your higher power is. That started to create a lot more momentum in my life and a lot more opportunity that I started to see, because now I was asking for it, right? So the only thing you have to do is just initially start asking, right? And then your reticular activating system in your brain is going to start finding those opportunities that have always been there, but you didn't see them as opportunities because you weren't in the right mindset at the time. And so once that happened, I started leaning into mentorship, personal development, got into sales, and really started to create a lot of momentum. And then we started the podcast, and the rest was history.
Yeah, dude, that's so good. Was there like a specific moment that led to you making that video? Was it like, all right, this is enough? Or because I feel like so many people get into the trap of, like you said, the depression, unhealthy relationships, and it's just their new reality. It's just a constant cycle of, okay, this is my new identity. That's how I'm going to live the rest of my life. Unless something catastrophic changes that they're like, okay, I really need to change my way of doing things, my lifestyle. Was it like one event pushed you to that limit, or were you just like, hey, I'm not happy right now?
Yeah, I think some people have those like one-off events that make them make that radical change. But like my rock bottom is a lot different than other people's rock bottom, right? I wasn't like homeless, or I didn't get into like a crazy car crash, or wasn't on the brink of death. But it was all these little mini traumas that continued to compound over time, right? And so like that's something that I encourage you, if you come from this like white collar background, or like you didn't really have the downside of like going through the crazy adversity that we hear some of the stories about, like your story is still powerful, and rock bottom's only relative, right? So your story still means something to you. So embrace that, right? And so like for me, it was just all of those mini traumas of not being able to stay consistent. And I don't know what led me to make that video, but I'm very grateful I did.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you still have it today?
I do. Yeah. I have it on my phone, 6 minutes. I've chopped it up. I've showed a couple people it. I've done a couple keynotes where I've shown like snippets of it just to get super vulnerable. Cause like my goal is simply to inspire the people that I once was, right? Yeah. Like my 21-year-old self needed to hear what I'm talking about right now, because he'd be much further ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's amazing. So we talked about, what you became after baseball, after the spell of depression and the bad habits. Why was it business? Why was that something you wanted to get into? What sparked your interest there?
Yeah, so in the business world, what the business world allowed me to do was bring that competitive spark back, right? Because the toughest part about, sorry, are you could edit this, right? I'm just turning my phone off. I got you. The toughest part about sports and when sports ends is redesigning that culture of like team and winning, because that does not exist at the bottom of most corporate ladders, right? Like there's no such thing as like teamwork and goals to create. So I thought entrepreneurship and sales was the way to get my competitive edge back. So I initially got into financial services, and it's kind of like this, like you eat what you kill type of mentality, where like you just go out and find as many people and you sell them stuff. And I was selling people things that they actually needed, and in financial products and things like that. And it sparked me. It like reinvigorated me. And my first month in sales, I made $20,000, and I was like, oh my God, like this is the easiest thing ever. I'm the best in the world. And then I didn't do the same activity that I did the following months, and I made $0 for the next 2 months. And that was humbling, and it's something that I needed. I was like, wow, okay, you're not the shit again. So I was constantly being humbled in this world. And then something hit me. I don't know when it was. I'd be lying if I told you. It was definitely in like Q4 of 2019. And I got to this point where, because like I wasn't working out much, like my body was not in good shape. I never woke up feeling great. And I was like, you know what? Let me just buy in to just doing something small. Because every time that I would try and work out again, I would go all out and be sore for the next 4 or 5 days and not want to work out again. And I was like, you know what? Let me just work on walking around the block today. Let me just like literally just take a walk around the block and do nothing further. Let me go to the gym for 5 minutes. This comes from like books like Atomic Habits or The Compound Effect. I just literally live my life based off those principles because they obviously work. And so every day I would show up and do that walk. And then eventually I would walk a little bit further. And then I would run. And then eventually like that came down to going to the gym all the time. And then I ran triathlons. And now I'm going to run a marathon. And like all these different things compound. But it's really daunting to try and do all of that in one day, right? Hit the home run every single time instead of committing to those singles and doubles every single day in that system that ultimately allows you to create the goals forever, to hit your goals forever. And so once we started the podcast, we started to build a lot more momentum, and then we started creating this branding around consistency wins. Once I started those habits, I just posted for accountability on Instagram, consistency wins. And then like I saw people like really taking a liking to it. And so I was like, yes, you know what, screw it. Like consistency wins, let's go. Let's just keep doing it. And then, I urge people to force themselves to get uncomfortable, right? Like if you want to go about something, like post about it because it's going to hold you accountable, because if you stop doing it, people are like, you're not real, So that was what I started to do. And that compounded significantly to, some massive wins over time.
That's awesome. I want to zoom in on the small habits real quick, because a lot of times if you say to someone, hey, go walk around the block, go read 10 pages, go meditate for 5 minutes, they might be like, what's the point? It's so small, it's so minuscule. Why would I be doing this? But you're saying, hey, doing these small things led me to more success in business. It got my life back on track. I was better because of the consistency in my life. Why is this so important? Why are these small habits that we are all supposed to be doing, why are they so important to greater overall success when they seem so small in the moment?
Great question. And it's all about momentum and compounding, right? It is way too tough to do all of that all the time, every day. We're not going to feel like it. So if I could commit to the micro, like the mega micro, and I could get 1% better each day, maybe even 0.5% better. Or sometimes on some days it's going to be 0.1% better, right? But if I can get better each day, then I know that I'm moving forward. Because if I'm staying the same, I'm automatically going to lose because everyone's going to surpass me. So I say it all the time, competition is fiercest at the middle in the sense of mediocrity. Everyone's fighting to be average. So if you just choose to get better each day, you can't lose. Logic, math, and science automatically tells you that if you do this for long enough, it will come true, right? Like the only thing that I sought out to do was like follow people that were where I wanted to be. A guy like an Ed Milet or somebody like that, like a Gary Vee. And I would just reverse engineer everything that they said in all of their podcasts of like, hey, what habits do I need to follow? And then I would cherry pick some of those habits that aligned with my vision. And I would do that every day. And then I created a system. I created a system called Build to make it a lot easier for people to do this and move forward every day and take the emotions out of it, because your emotions are very tough and you need to deal with your emotions. That's not saying that like you should just never think about your emotions, but in the world of high performance, your emotions don't matter. The only thing that matters is your standard, right? Standard over feelings. So with that, I created this system called Build. B stands for body. So what am I doing for my body today? This is something that you should do on a daily basis and write it out the night before so that you're prepared. So what am I doing the next morning for my body? Am I going to do yoga in the morning, or am I going to go for that walk? Or, what am I feeding my body? Things like that. Something very small. It's a workout or whatever that looks like. U stands for you. What is it that I wanted to do today? Did I want to go walk my dog and take her to the dog park? Or did I want to go play video games? Like block that out. Because like ultimately you're doing all this stuff so that you have the time margin to do what you want to do. Right? So build that into your calendar. Make sure that it's not like bad habits, but ultimately you got to do what you want to do because that's going to keep you recharged, right? Keep you rest.
Yep.
I stands for income. what am I doing to move my income forward? That's like direct like KPIs that you need to be following, right? Like how many sales calls do I need to be making? How many referrals do I need to be getting? Am I book like this is a reflection of income? Like you might not receive immediate income from doing this podcast, but you're building out relationship capital that's ultimately going to like you and I are going to connect. I'll connect you with someone. You'll connect me with something. Something will spark because of doing this for a long enough time, right? L stands for love or relationships. How am I going to continue to pour into the relationships that I already have with my family, with my girlfriend, with my business relationships? And then how am I going to go create more? So creating metrics around that. It's going to feel forced in the beginning for all this stuff because you feel like you're just going to check off a box. Over time, as you create that habit, you're going to be able to bring more intentionality to those habits. And then D stands for personal development. What am I reading every day? What am I consuming? One of the biggest things that you might want to do is if you feel yourself stuck in a rut, I unfollowed 2,000 to 3,000 people on my Instagram and stuff like that because I created my own algorithm. The algorithm is toxic, right? It could be toxic, but because like I hear all the people saying it, and I'm sorry if I jump around all the time, but I hear people saying like, oh, Instagram and social media is toxic. It might be toxic for you, but I'm only seeing motivational things, things about business, connecting with people that I genuinely want to know what's going on in their lives. It's going to burn some bridges, but ultimately you don't really care what's going on in that person's life and vice versa. So make sure that every page that you're following is bringing value because it's going to be your number one influence over time. Because whether we like it or not, we're all addicted to these apps. So we might as well have them work for us as opposed to against us. That's the build system.
Yeah, I love that. I want to point out the negative social media at the end there because there's so many times people will say to me like, "Oh, did you see this?" Like something negative in the news or whatever. I'm just like, "Nope, I have no idea what you're talking about." And I'm cool with that because I'm like, my consumption on social media, podcasts, it's not all that negative stuff. It's what I want to see, what's going to help me grow. So that's a great point right there because anyone that says, "Hey, my algorithm is so negative, it's so toxic," well, you're controlling who you're following, or you're the one clicking on the post to tell Instagram, hey, they like seeing this, I'm going to show them more.
You could tell a lot about someone by the size of their problems,
Yeah.
right? So like if people are coming to you with these small problems, they're automatically vetting themselves out of your circle. And that doesn't mean you can't love them, right? Like I love my friends from back home. They're like, I still talk to them to this day because like they're so fun to be with. But I had to make a decision when I wanted to like really run in life and go to the next level that I was no longer going to just sit in a room, smoke weed, and bet on sports every day, right? Like that was just not in alignment with my vision. I love them though. Like I still talk to them all the time, but you have to, really make them understand like, hey, this is not all that is to life, right? Like just because the Kansas City Chiefs didn't cover the spread does not mean that like your life is over, right? So like you got to be around people that have much bigger problems than that. And that's the decision that I made. But ultimately it's the hardest hurdle to get over, the initial phase of saying no and feeling super uncomfortable.
Right. I love the build framework, and I want to point that out. I can see one problem if you address it to someone because they might think, okay, build, let's see what I can do tomorrow. B, for my body, I'm going to go run 5 miles. I really want to start running. I'm going to do that. I'm going to be doing, I'm going to go to the beach for an hour. And then like they're listening to extreme for everything because they get excited about things. They want to read an entire book instead of 10 pages. What is your recommendation for someone starting it? Because oftentimes we get into these habits and we want to just go all in and just dedicate all this time, we burn out. So how can someone start using build today and do it effectively?
Start mega, mega micro. Like I'm all about thinking big. I'm all about thinking big, but I don't want to say acting small, but starting small, right? Like if you don't have a foundation and you're trying to build a foundation, start small, right? Start like in the very, very deep micro. And I think in the beginning, something that can be really helpful is having somebody to hold you accountable, whether that's a coach or a mentor or just a friend that you're like, hey, let's do this system together and let's force each other to just stay consistent. Because ultimately, I would rather do it every day than do it balls to the wall for 12 months and then burn out and never do it again. Because I've been there. I've done it a million times. It's which is why I just commit to the system because the system works. My feelings don't. Because like it's going to be tough because you're going to get very impatient that the results aren't automatically happening, right? Like we just started a new business about 1.5 years ago. And like up until that point, every single thing that I've done, if I did it for a minimum of 3 to 6 months, the fruit would yield significantly. But then we took a big risk in starting this new business. And the fruit is starting to really hit, like we're seeing it, but it took a little bit longer. And in that time, it's going to be super frustrating, which is why you have to be around people who have walked that path before you, because they're going to let you know that you're on the right path. And you need to be around that because ultimately you're going to quit. And you're going to want to quit every single day. And that's okay. Every single person wants to quit every single day. Like I had dinner with Ed Milet and Tim Grover this week. It was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. And they talk about it all the time. Like they want to quit. They don't want to wake up and work out and stuff. But their standard is more important than their feelings. So now I just focus on quitting tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, let's just not quit today. I'll quit tomorrow. And then the next day I quit tomorrow. And then some days are going to be great. But the truth is, ultimately, there's going to be probably more days you want to quit in the beginning than not. And all you have to do is just forego that feeling and taking that action, because I can promise you, quitting on yourself, coming from experience, is the only thing it leads to is regret.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a shared feeling among a lot of high-level entrepreneurs and high-achieving people. I mean, including yourself. You need that validation of, hey, I'm on the right path. I can just wait till tomorrow. Being a podcast host, a business owner, let's shed some light on those aspects of your life. What's your vision behind them?
Sure. So I'll right the ship real quick because you said business coach. I'm not a business coach. I don't do any form of coaching. Over time, I definitely want to get into the coaching world. We run a business advisory firm. So in the beginning, when we first started the podcast, that was just kind of like a catalyst for our financial services business. And through that podcast, the initial thing was like, let's just start talking about our experience of being self-employed. It was me and my business partner, Landon, at the time. And then we quickly realized, like, nobody wants to listen to two 23-year-olds talk about success when we have $1,000 to our name, right? So let's start having really successful people on. And that's one of the easiest ways to bring value to someone immediately. Like, let's say you go to a networking event or you meet someone that's like insanely, further ahead in business than you are. They're not going to buy your shit immediately, right? It takes the relationship game. So the easiest way to go about it, instead of trying to sell them your stuff, is, hey, I would love to interview you and promote all the stuff that you have, right? And promote it with no intentions behind it besides just bringing value. Over time, you're able to take those conversations offline and find different ways to connect. Initially for us, it was like, let's use this as free mentorship because we can't pay for the mentorship right now. You know what I mean? So like, let's just do everything that they're telling and we're able to ask them the very detailed questions selfishly. Over time, we got valuable enough through using the build system to bring our value proposition offline to these business owners. That resulted in multiple business partnerships, multiple joint ventures. We had a joint venture with a business influencer on YouTube who has millions of followers, and he started driving traffic towards our agency. And we built out an agency. We quit our jobs. We started this business together. It was getting 1,000 to 2,000 leads a month. And we built out a sales organization, all that stuff, and it was crushing it. It was super lucrative, but it wasn't fulfilling whatsoever because we were doing this high volume, like trying to fit a square inside of a circle based on like recommending things. And I didn't want to have to constantly sell a product to get paid. And so what we realized was we love working with entrepreneurs and the financial services space is very valuable, but the model is broken. So let's go recreate the model. So we sold our business and we created a consulting firm that only operates on a flat fee. And we only work with entrepreneurs. And for that flat fee, we design all the optimization around their business. So when it comes to asset protection, like how and where do you own your assets? Owning them in such a way to where you're bulletproof on the personal and business side. Making sure that your articles of incorporation, your operating agreements are in place. Like all the boring stuff on the risk management side that like makes no sense to build a $50 million company if you have no foundation on that side, right? 2 is tax strategy. That's something that we really focus on in Blair. Like we're able to bring value immediately because a lot of entrepreneurs' relationships with their CPA is like, hey, let me do business. Let me send them my books. And then at the end of the year, they tell me what I owe, and that's the relationship. But the tax code was designed for entrepreneurs. So how can we start to really plan around that come Q2, Q3, so that we're basically controlling what our tax bill is? Then we really help them grow. So facilitating that growth, whether that's building up the balance sheet or deploying capital into different opportunities, reinvesting back into the business. Business owners, their best investment is their business and the most risky. So why are we going to continuously take risk outside of the business instead of doubling down on what they're best at? And then lastly, we help them exit. If we're building a $50 million company, how do we actually extract $50 million from that? So when you ask what our vision is, one, it's to help people that were in our shoes to create enterprise value, because we were just building a really cushy job for ourselves that was very high paying, but we weren't able to extract ourselves from the business. So how do I build a business that I don't grow to hate? And how do I remove myself to where the business grows even if I'm not involved in it, right? And that comes through optimization. And then also the vision is reinventing the industry on the financial services side, because I hate the advisor model of like, let me just sell the next product to get paid, because it's a very biased recommendation. And then on the personal side, the vision is to just continuing to be the best human that I possibly can be. Like what fuels me is being the absolute best I can be, to be proof to other people that you can make a change within a couple of years and really stick to it. Like people do change. I believe that. And so how do I take that system and build it out to where I can be the best human? Because the best way to influence others is by doing it the work yourself. And then, because like, let's say that you're first starting out with something, right? Like if I first read a book and I don't have the foundation built in place, but then I read a book and go tell everyone about it. Hey, you need to be doing this, or you need to be doing this. Like, dude, you haven't even done that. Like you're broke. You know what I mean? So if I can just go be the example, that's the number one way to force people to take action. The problem is it just takes a little bit of longer time.
Man, I love that. It's amazing what you're doing right now. Super proud of you. I want to ask, what like motivates you every day to get up and keep going towards your goals?
Nothing. I don't have motivation. I have discipline.
Love it.
What I did though, I started to connect to my purpose a little bit more, especially over the last couple of weeks. And there's a coach that we work with. His name is Ben Newman. Ben Newman's a top 5 coach in the world, and this guy is like insane. He is just the best of the best. And he talks about the burn. So connecting to your burn, that's beyond your purpose, beyond your why, and it really like, what is that deep desire that like when you think about it, it fires you up? And so I went deep into the think tank, because it's very tough to find that answer, right? Some people, they had, large traumas in their life that really motivates them and inspires them. For me, I couldn't really pinpoint it. But then I realized that like my burn was the story that I shared with you earlier, was with that baseball, because I had it. I had the ability to go. And so I now write down every single day, remember who doubted you, right? And the ultimate answer was that I doubted myself. The reason why I didn't succeed is because I doubted myself. You're always going to have people that doubt you, right? And that's going to be a little bit of short-term motivation, like, oh, you can't do this. Okay, great. I'm going to go prove you wrong, right? But that expires over time. But if you lack the self-belief and you realize that my outcome wasn't what I wanted it to be, because I believed everything that they were saying and I didn't have that belief, I have to now make sure that I build up that self-belief and I believe it. So that fires me up every single day. So I have it on my alarm clock. It says, remember who doubted you. I have post-it notes everywhere, because I'm trying to connect to that burn every single day. Because when I don't want to do something, I realized that if I decide to succumb to that decision to not do it, then I'm no different than the decision I made 5 years ago, right? So how can I connect to that burn every single day? That's quote unquote the motivation.
Yeah, that's an amazing mindset right there. I love that. How do you define the word success?
It's a great question. And I still haven't been able to pinpoint that, to be honest. I think a lot of people have really good answers for that. For me, it's getting better every day. Committing to the system and bringing intentionality around it, giving myself the freedom and the margin to be the best human I can, not just for myself, but for the other people around me, and pouring into them. I think that's what success is, right? Is just keeping your word, doing the things that you said you would because you said you would do it, and just doing it every single day. So I have a formula that I think happiness equals self-confidence, and self-confidence only comes from doing the hard shit you said you would do every single day because you said you would.
For sure. Absolutely. Love it. Before I ask my last question, where can people find you after this? Instagram, podcast, website? Where do you want everyone to go after this?
Yeah, so you could find me on AntonioVaglica.com, Vaglica on Instagram. Podcast is called The Consistency Wins Podcast. Connect with me. I answer my own DMs, so yeah, happy to connect.
Awesome. Well, Antonio, what is one piece of advice you would leave the audience with today? Someone that they want to be successful, they feel lost. What would you leave that person with?
Don't be upset with the results that you didn't create from the work that you didn't do. That's one of the things that hit me. Like, I had a mentor tell me that one time, and I was like, wow. Like, that hit me like a ton of bricks. Yeah. Because, like, we're so focused on the outcome, but we didn't commit to the process for long enough, right? Like, how can I have a six pack when I just started working out a week ago, right? So with that, not being upset with the results that you didn't create because of your lack of focus, your lack of direction. The only thing that you need to do is focus on consistency in the right direction, right? So that's where I think it's important to find a coach or a mentor. I don't have that to sell you. Like, I can point you in the right direction for one of those people. But if we can find someone that can ultimately help us focus on the end in mind, all we have to then do is reverse engineer what those habits look like and commit to those every day. And then maybe on a monthly or quarterly basis, we shift based on what those outcomes look like. Hey, maybe I'm not on course. How do I tweak up the habits? But I'm always a big believer in the micro and just getting the work done.
Amazing. Well, bro, you're an inspiration to so many people. So thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story. I had an absolute blast.
Appreciate you, brother.